All right, welcome everyone to another episode of the Callie Chronicles. I apologize for the delay in the uploads. It's been really crazy around here. I have a full-time job, and then the tracking calls have been pretty steady with the rut. Everyone taking their rut vacation, a lot more hunters hitting the woods. And it's finally starting to slow down a little bit. We got a little bit of snow up here. That helps kind of quieten down tracking calls because people can follow deer tracks in the snow even if they don't have blood. So I'm going to try and get caught up here. Today we're going to do tracks 13 through 16. First thing I would like to ask you all to do me a favor is head over to Alps Outdoors Facebook page. They're a supporter of the Callie Chronicles. They also support some of the other stuff I do, like calling all turkeys. And I use a lot of their gear, like this little game vest for tracking. It's a upland game vest, but it's real handy as a tracker because I can hold like little light sticks in one to drop to mark a blood trail at night, tissue, water bottles, and a water bowl for Callie. It also picks up these cockleburs pretty easily too. Anyway, it makes it real handy to create the Callie Chronicles because I have a little walkie-talkie here in my mics and stuff, and I don't have to worry about all that stuff when I'm out there. And I love their products, the turkey vest when I'm turkey hunting and other stuff they got. So do me a favor, head over to their Facebook page or just message them and say, hey, appreciate you guys supporting Shane and the Callie Chronicles. We really enjoy it if that's what you want to do. I'm not forcing you to, I'm just asking a favor. But anyway, let's get to the tracks. All right, so we're going to mix things up here a little bit. We'll talk about track 13 here in a moment. But I want to track, and then 14 also. So I want to start off with track 15. Track 15, the hunter hit a deer, slightly quarter in two. I think that's what he described it as, and behind the shoulder, and didn't get much penetration. I'm thinking right off the bat that this is probably a high shoulder shot, but he assured me that it was back and a little lower, so it should have got into the lung area. So maybe one lung. So we put Callie on the track, and she struggled a little bit, but we were able to advance it some, and we found blood. And this track was near a river, and I always, it's not that I hate tracking near rivers. Rivers always put a question in your mind. If you can't locate the deer, did the deer get washed down in the river? And so we had one of those situations. It wasn't a very deep river, but it was moving pretty steadily. And it was deep enough that if a deer had died in the river, it could have washed downstream. But we found a drop of blood right at the river's bank. It was private land on the other side that we didn't have permission to track in. This was in Wisconsin, so you had to ask permission for every property you cross. Unlike Minnesota, as long as it's not posted and as long as it's not agricultural land, you can continue tracking without permission. But you have to leave if you're told to by the landowner. But it's always a good idea to just get permission if you can, but sometimes we don't have time to do that. But in this case, we didn't have permission to cross. We did check a small island in the river. There was no deer there. We kind of grid searched or wind searched with Callie's nose downstream, but it was pretty obvious this deer had crossed the river at that point. The hunter informed me later that he did get permission to check on the other side after I was gone. The next day I think he did. And he found no sign of the deer over there. So these one lung shot deer are usually just as difficult recovering as a high shoulder shot deer. Every once in a while we do recover a one lung deer. We actually have two this year, and you'll get to see those later on in some other episodes. It was later in the season, but they're real tough deer to recover. All right, track 16. And so on this one here, the hunter shot a deer broadside. Problem is he had no idea where he hit the deer. He thought he heard the arrow hit. He could not recover the arrow at the time of tracking or prior to me getting there, and had no blood. So was this even a hit? And in this case, this is why I like to see most hunters use a lighted knock. Lighted knocks are so valuable in aiding a hunter in identifying where they hit a deer, especially at low light. That last 4 or 5 minutes of legal light, and you shoot a deer without a lighted knock, it's very difficult to see where that arrow hit. In this case, I put Callie where the deer was supposedly standing. She seemed to be tracking something. She took me across the property and then hit a property line. We don't know for sure the deer went that way because we didn't have any blood confirmation. So I brought her back and restarted her several times, and we never came up with anything. Now, a little update on this track, and this is kind of a benefit of getting these videos up late. Hunters have had time to get back with new information. You know, trail cam pictures of deer that we've tracked have popped up, and we'll touch on those as we get to those tracks. But anyway, the hunter and another hunter that was hunting the same property, I guess a week or two later, ended up finding the arrow, and they said it was clean of blood. They thought that the deer had still been hit because where the arrow was found was farther up the trail. But truthfully, I mean, that arrow could have hit a tree limb and ricocheted up that way. So we don't really know. I do have an update though on this deer. The hunter did send me a trail cam picture, and I'll show you the picture. And as you can see in the picture, there's no visible wounds. So maybe he didn't hit the deer after all. So sometimes that's what we face as a tracker, and a lot of people, I posted some of our tracking result, our stats for the past 3 seasons on the Callie Chronicles page. So if you want to head over there when you get a chance and look at that, you'll see our recovery rates around 45%. And I had a hunter ask me, why is it so low? And a lot of times it's because of these reasons: a property line, or the deer may have not even been hit. And so a lot of times we're chasing live deer, so that's you can only find dead deer with the dog. So that's a lot of times the reason why our recovery rates are lower. Number 14 is a prime example of that, track 14. So I want you guys to look at this image. This is a still image that the hunter sent me from a video he had, and he indicated that it was a gut shot deer. Based on the dark area in this picture and where he told me the arrow hit the deer, I believed it to be correct. Now this was for a young hunter. This is the dad that called me, and for his 12-year-old son. And so based on that, and we have a very high recovery rate for gut shot deer, or deer hit, you know, liver and that sort of thing. Those are usually tend to be easier to recover. Number one, there's usually not much blood, so the hunter's not able to track it very far and ruin the scent trail by grid searching or following that track. They really have no idea where the deer went and no blood to follow, so they back out and usually call a tracker. And just to emphasize what happens if you get out there grid searching, why you should get a dog in there first. As you're walking around searching for a deer, your boots or your pants or whatever's picking up deer scent where this deer left. The dogs are tracking deer scent. Each deer smells different, so you get a dog locked onto one particular deer, they can track it without blood. Well, your boots and clothing's picking up these scent molecules, and then you start grid searching, you're creating a lot of false tracks, and the dog's got to figure all that out, and so it makes it real difficult. If you make a bad hit and you know it, and just back out and call a dog, now you have a clean track, is what we like to call it, because you haven't contaminated it, and our odds are much higher at recovery. A lot of people are reluctant to call a tracker because they're afraid of the price. Most trackers don't charge much at all. You know, they charge maybe gas money or take tips. There are some out there that do it kind of as a side business, and they may charge $200 or $250, but for the vast majority, they don't charge much at all. And so don't be afraid to call them, and call them ahead of season and get their rates, so you know if it's something you can't really afford, maybe you can pick a tracker that's a little more in your budget and go from there. So anyway, enough about that. So on this track, I brought Callie out and I put her on it, and she struggled a little bit, and we got her locked back on, and she advanced the trail a couple hundred yards, 250 yards, something like that, and we found blood to confirm that. So I knew we were on this deer. She took me all the way to a property line in a big open field. It turns out we did have permission to go across that property line. At the time I didn't know, so I stopped at the edge of that field and we looked around across it, and it was real short grass, so we could see all the way across it. I restarted her a few times, and she kind of kept taking me to that same general direction. So I left that track scratching my head, because I figured that deer wouldn't have gone as far as it did, and it was a long ways from the hit location to where we found that blood, and we grid searched the area with Callie's nose, kind of a large area past that last blood, and a dog's very good at covering a lot of area. If we get within 50 to 100 yards of a deer and we're downwind of it, she'll smell it, she'll take me to it. So I was pretty confident that deer wasn't in the area. Now, here's where it gets kind of interesting or a little funny and kind of relieving for me and the 12-year-old, because I felt bad that we weren't able to recover his deer. If I had to pick and choose which deer I recover, I would always prefer to recover a young hunter's deer. But I had the hunter transfer the full resolution video, and I'm not sure if he took it with a phone or what he took it with, but apparently to me it looks like it was cellular phone video or smartphone video. I took a look at it in my software and slowed it down frame by frame, and as you'll see in this video, the arrow came nowhere close to guts. From the best I can tell, it looks like it goes right through the neck meat or the back strap, you know, top above the shoulder, right across the neck or back strap, and very much a non-lethal hit. This deer, I'm sure, is out there roaming around. That's some of the things we run into. And then you probably ask, well, Shane, why didn't you take a look at the video beforehand? Well, when we're getting multiple calls a day, we don't have time to stop a lot of times and analyze or get videos sent. I did 3 tracks on this particular day, so it was kind of a send me what you got, take a look at the picture, take your word for it, that's where you saw the arrow hit, and then run and take care of the track and then move on to the next. Try to fit as many people as possible, but at the same time try to do a good job at it. So we spend about an hour and a half to 2 hours at each track sometimes. So I was really relieved to see that video after we failed to recover that deer. So with that said, let's get to the one recovery we had out of those 4 tracks, and that was track 13. This track here, the hunter hit it back a little bit, and he didn't get a pass through, but he thought the arrow penetrated deep enough that maybe it poked out the other side. And I'm going to stress the pass-through part real quick. So if you look at those stats on the Callie Chronicles page, doesn't matter what broadhead you use, if you can get a pass-through, that really increases our odds of recovery. I don't know if it translates to just regular tracking without a dog, but as far as tracking with Callie, our recovery rates are 65, 70%, somewhere in that range. I'll have to go back and look at it, but without a pass-through, our recovery rate's around 25%. So it doesn't matter which broadhead you use in that regard. Now, with fixed broadheads, we get a lot higher rate of calls for pass-throughs on those where the hunter's lost blood or whatever than the mechanicals. So the mechanicals seem to suffer on getting pass-throughs. But on the flip side, when you get a pass-through with a mechanical, we have a much higher success rate than we do on pass-throughs with fixed. And I don't know why that is, probably just because of the wider cutting diameter. So that's something to ponder. I'm not going to go into which broadhead is better. Obviously, both of them work well if you can get a pass-through. But it seems like you got to weigh your options there. So you make up your own mind on that portion. But in this one here, he didn't get a pass-through, but he thought the arrow was in deep enough that it was poking out the other side. So in essence, it was a pass-through. But I never like deer having an arrow still in them because it tends to keep them moving. Even on a gut shot deer, if you can't get a complete pass through, that deer doesn't seem to bed down in a timely fashion. Anyway, we gave the deer the appropriate amount of time, at least I thought. I couldn't track the next morning because I had work, or otherwise I would have waited till the next morning just to give it some extra time. But I felt that if it was indeed a liver hit, that it should be dead by then. This is a pretty straightforward track. Took Callie to the hit site. She followed the blood. We found the arrow, and it was basically a straight line from there. There's really no need in showing a satellite image of it because it was basically just straight away about 250 yards. Easy, girl. Yeah, I got blood in this ditch. And here's your arrow.
Should have went straight up the hill there.
Yeah, just leave your arrow right here. Easy, girl. Easy. Let me know if you see any blood to indicate we're off the track. I'm gonna just let her keep going.
Yeah, I'm still on blood back here. Just climb the hill.
So did you think we went in the right direction?
Yes, sir.
What's wrong with this gimbal? What a joke. Oops, got deer eyes. Come here, girl. Come here. Come here. Callie, stop. Come here. Come on. We got the deer. I think we got your deer. I see eyeballs up ahead.
Very good.
No, that means he's not dead.
Yeah, probably better back out then.
I'd almost like to sneak back over and get a better look to confirm it's your deer. It looked like it was a deer laying on the hillside. Looked big. I could see his eyes, and it didn't look like it was like alert. It was like kind of 40 yards. It's like it goes straight that way, and it kind of goes down the hill. On the other side of the hill, he's laying down watching his back trail. He didn't get up when Callie started barking. He just laid. So I found this deer, but I wasn't 100% sure it was our deer, but I was fairly confident it was the one we were after. The fact it was straight in line with the track Callie had us on, and it was bedded down facing his back trail. But just to confirm it with the hunter, because I couldn't come back the next morning track, I wanted to walk up there and let him lay eyes on it to see it was the deer we were after. When we got back to the deer, I noticed 3 sets of other eyes back behind it, and they would disappear and pop over here, and then one would be here, and the only thing I could imagine it would be was coyotes. Coyotes had already got on this deer. It was still alive, but it was hurt. In the process of trying to point out the deer to the hunter and seeing those coyotes, and I don't know if it was because of us or the coyotes near it, the deer got up and moved about 100 yards off to the right, but then it looked like it laid back down. Not a whole lot you can do in this situation. I did suggest to the hunter that he come back in there, maybe bring a sleeping bag, and sit down next to a tree somewhere to stay warm in the sleeping bag, and just shine his light over there every once in a while to keep the coyotes off this deer until it expired. There was nothing he could do to put this deer out during the nighttime hours. There's no way he was going to get close enough with a knife because the deer was still able to get up and move. But it would let us get close enough, within 50 yards and just lay there. So that was basically the only option I could think of. If you guys can think of something better, put it in the comments. But needless to say, the hunter just waited till daylight and went back in there, and sure enough, he recovered his deer where we last saw it. But it had been eaten by the coyotes. Not the entire carcass, but they had gotten onto it a little bit. All right, in the picture this recovery, you'll see the hunter's got the deer, and you'll see a cut across the nose. And it turns out, when he shot this deer, he told me that the deer had its head turned back, either grooming itself or looking back the other way. And apparently he didn't realize at the time of the shot, the broadhead must have went right across his nose as it went into his chest cavity. So if you see the picture, or you saw me posted on social media and you're asking what that cut across his nose was, that was the broadhead going right across his nose into the chest cavity. In summary, use a lighted knock if you can. We love videos. I've had about 4 tracks this year where the hunter had video and we were able to analyze it. So even if it's a Tacticam on the end of your bow or something, those come in really handy when you're trying to figure out where you hit the deer and how to proceed after the shot. And get to know your neighbors ahead of time so these property line issues don't become a huge factor. They haven't been a huge factor this year, but in the past we've run into it quite a bit. And I guess last but not least, get a hold of your local trackers ahead of the season. When we get busy right now, you're going to have a hard time getting a tracker if we've already got tracks lined up. And that's another point. As soon as you make a bad hit, don't back out, go back in the morning, track all day, grid search, and then 12, 20 hours later trying to get a tracker on it. You're likely not going to get one. Number one, we can't just, as soon as you call us, hop in our trucks and come out. We have to make arrangements. So the sooner you call us, the sooner we can make arrangements to kind of figure out what time we need to be there. If you call us at the last minute, odds are we have other tracks that are fresher, and we're going to take those over yours, because it's kind of like an emergency room where the doctor's trying to figure out which patient's more important to take care of, which one has the best odds. We're going to do that when it gets really hot and heavy in calls. We're not going to take a 24-hour-old track that was maybe a high shoulder when we have a kid over here that shot one this morning, backed out. It's a clean track. So keep that in mind when you deer hunting. Make the right moves. Get a trackers that you're on it as soon as possible. Even if you don't want him to track, just kind of call to get advice. And that'll wrap up this episode. I'm going to try and spit out as many as I can. We'll hopefully have another one up in a few days. And we got some interesting ones, and one that kind of got a little scary, and you'll see that coming up in another week or two. So please accept my apology for the delay in the videos, and I guess we'll see you guys on the next episode.